Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast, the show that explores all the ways you can evolve into the best version of yourself as a leader. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love and care and inclusion, it will make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about love as a leadership and business strategy. Let's do this.
Hey, so you've been following me for a while. You probably know this, that I am working on my book. I'm on the tail end of this 5-year journey. If you've written a book, you probably know what I'm talking about, but hopefully it hasn't taken you 5 years to write your book. It's taken me 5 years because COVID kind of, was that monkey wrench in the process, and it just slowed things down. And I lost my editor and my agent as well. And I had to, find my way around. And instead of shopping around for a new literary agent, I decided to kind of just shop my manuscript on my own, which delayed it even further. So all that to say, hey, it's in the editor's hands. It's been revised, and I have approved it. And in 2 weeks, I get to send it in to the publisher, which is the deadline, June 1st. And from there, we just wait for them to create the book. And we are hoping that by November timeframe, it's going to be in your hands, or in your phones or in your laptops. So that is my hope. And again, if you are just catching wind about what this book is about, it's a book on leading with love. What else? It's getting all the topics that you've been following over the years about how to lead with practical, actionable love, day in and day out. And I have boiled it down to six behaviors of how to do that. And I'm going to talk about, having patience to go through this process of writing a manuscript. And not only that, but before writing a manuscript, is shopping it around to both agents and publishers with the book proposal, which I had to put together, 80 pages long, etc. I mean, this, I could have taken the easy route, right? A lot of people self-publish. And, it gives you a lot of, freedom to kind of with royalties and retaining the rights to your work and all that. But self-publishing, and you may disagree with me, is limiting with the reach. And I wanted this book to have a global reach. And so I, signed on with a publisher, Business Expert Press, who is going to get it out there, out to the world and to corporations and also to university systems. So I'm excited. And I mentioned patience, right? Yeah, it's taken me a lot of patience to get through this. And speaking of patience, it's the third chapter is a chapter on leading with patience. Something that we rarely see these days in this, world of instant gratification. So you got a glimpse of that on my last episode, my solo episode, where I talked about that. So I'm excited and can't wait for you guys to hopefully grab it soon and have that in your hands, because I truly believe it's going to make a difference in how you lead and manage people. All right, let's get to our featured guest today, and he is a good one. We're going to be talking with Brad Deutser. Brad is the author of Belonging Rules, 5 Crucial Actions That Build Unity and Foster Performance. And let me set this up like this. We've all been in situations where maybe we felt excluded. And we may also been in situations where we've even excluded others ourselves, right? Let's be honest. Or maybe you've been told, once or twice, hey, you don't belong here. Whew, that's a tough one. So belonging is often overlooked by leaders as irrelevant. It's seen as this social concept that's not critical to the vision, the direction, and and the responsibility of people in the C-suite making the decisions. However, ignoring belonging can also be really dangerous. So Brad Deutser and his team of psychologists in the Clarity Institute and Institute for Belonging, they surveyed more than 15,000 employees across various industries and occupational roles. They found the feeling of belonging not only to be a critical determinant of employee satisfaction, engagement, and effort, but also, here's the punchline, the most important predictor of all these outcomes. So now in his book, Belonging Rules, Brad gives leaders a guide to make sure their team members are feeling included and feeling empowered. So we're going to learn the belonging rules that Brad created. It's the 5 things that leaders must consider each and every time they make decisions for themselves and their company. For example, one of the rules in Brad's book is demand 100% of the truth. It's to reject the more typical 80% of the truth that we find in most businesses, right? And instead require 100% of the truth 100% of the time. I love that. So we're going to learn exercises and steps that Brad's team has used to train thousands of leaders to instill a culture of inclusivity, which is not just a benefit to have, it's an essential to succeed. So Brad Deutser heads up Deutser and Deutser Clarity Institute. He is a trusted counselor, executive coach, and leadership guru for CEOs, board chairs, and top corporate management. He's an authority on matters of organizational change, belonging, DEI, and complexity in leadership. He's the best-selling author of a previous book called Leading Clarity, the breakthrough strategy to unleash people, profit, and performance. So, hey, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Brad Deutser. So I'm here with Brad now, and Brad, so this is how we start the show. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's your story?
My story is a story that's all over the place, and it's kind of ironic. It's hard to believe I'm an expert on belonging when so much of my career I didn't belong. My career has taken me to a lot of different places, a lot of different things. I started off at Ringling Brothers Barnum & Bailey Circus, literally shoveling elephant poop. Went to an all-female cause marketing firm as the token male, to an advertising agency where I lost my job because, I told 100% of the truth. And then I went on a journey to create something that I would be evaluated on people, on how people connect, how people perform, how people live their lives. And it's the journey I've been on since I started my company 20 plus years ago. My company, Deutser Consulting Firm, we're all about a human approach to change, organizational change, societal change, and all the things that impact and influence people on this magical journey we call life.
Yeah, I already feel like we're kindred spirits because I am also a 100% truth teller. And so, and when I got the book and I saw that that's one of the rules we're going to get into later, I thought, yeah, Brad and I are going to get along just fine. So, all right, so let's get into belonging rules. Why this book? Why now?
It was not the book that I planned to write. So let's be clear. The book that I planned to write was the book called A Leader of You, and really embracing what it means to be a human-centered leader. And I had written a chunk of it, and my partner in a lot of things I do from a thinking and writing standpoint said, no, not now. No, anybody can write this book. Not many people can write this book on belonging like you can. Shortly after George Floyd's murder, we were put into some really uncomfortable, vitriolic, hateful conversations. And I realized that there was a pattern. I have this magnet somewhere inside of me that attracts these complex, situations where we're called on to create bridges and bring people together, bring people to a table. And so she convinced me with some other people to say, you talk about human-centered leadership, you talk about being vulnerable, let's be vulnerable, let's help people. That it doesn't matter where you come from, what your title is, what you look like, what your background is, whatever any other kind of stereotype is. We all have a place at the table in this society to get it where we need and want it to be. So they encouraged me to write this book, and I tell a lot of stories in it. Some of them are uncomfortable, some of them are what they are, and some of them just make you kind of smile.
Yeah, we'll get it. I'd love to get into a couple of those stories. Now, what I know in the day and age that we're in is that belonging has been kind of thrown into the mix with DEI, right? So we got DEI and DEIB, and these terms have taken a hit, or the practices or the quote programs have really been hit hard over the last couple of years since COVID, right? A lot of people are saying that DEI is broken, that it needs to be fixed and all that. So let's clarify the belonging piece and maybe separate it from DEI, or maybe you can kind of just share your thoughts on whether it's how did the two relate, and also, Brad, a lot of people might jump into conclusions about what belonging is when it's not really belonging. So let's clarify, what is it, what it's not, and what is its relationship to DEI.
So it was one of the first things we tackle in the book is to say, let's create this very clear hierarchy. DEI has been politicized, overly politicized, and it becomes a must-have for some organizations. For others, it is an absolutely not have. Half the organization in most organizations say, this isn't for me, it's actually working against me. So there's a lot of issues with it. The number one issue, in my opinion, is that I don't think people argue about the importance of diversity. Diversity is important. In every way, shape, and form, diversity is important. I think the same thing we can talk about equity and how it's defined and inclusivity. So each of them on their own, but when they become this three-letter soup and it becomes shoved down people's throats, all of a sudden it becomes very difficult. And what happens in organizations, and we'll get into this in one of the rules, is if the organization's culture or identity, if this is a bolt onto it, it will never, ever work. And that's what you're seeing happen, organization after organization after organization. Yeah. It's a bolt on. And so our work really goes to show that there's something that is much bigger, and the umbrella over this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion is belonging. And belonging is the thing, and the research supports it. Everything, our work with organizations all over the country and world support this. Belonging is the thing that leaders are really looking for. They're not looking for a program. They're looking for a way to lead, a way to live, a way to connect their organizations. And so very, very different. The people who put the B on the end of DEIB, DEIA for accessibility, and B, it's a mistake because the B is actually the thing that goes above it. DEI can be a small piece under that umbrella for organizations that it's true to their identity and their core purpose. So very, very different. But the day that all the letters got jumbled together, we lost the integrity of each of the individual concepts.
Yeah. Is there a short definition for belonging?
Sure. It's really one of the interesting things, Marcel, that we found in our research. I assume that everyone had the same definition of belonging. It's just or something very similar. And the more people that we interviewed, the more we were like, whoa, wait a second. This is super interesting. Thousands of people had thousands of different ways that they described what it meant to belong. So one of the first things that we did was to create a definition for belonging.
Yeah.
And belonging is where we hold space of something of shared importance. It's a place where we come together on shared values, on our identity. It's a place where we don't have to agree in order to belong, but there's a shared framework that's understood. And what's really important in our definition of it, it's a place that there's an invitation into, and there's an acceptance of that invitation. And what we can get into when we talk about this idea of human leadership, or as we talk about human-centered leaders, the invitation in, the acceptance of that invitation is fundamental to the idea of belonging. And belonging in its core is it gives us a place of security, of acceptance, of unity when we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So, that's how we define it. I think people go into it always thinking that, well, so-and-so has a different belief than me, and therefore they can't belong, or I can't belong with them. And the reality is that's just not true. We don't have to agree in order to belong, but there has to be a respect and framework that we can have those disagreements.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to fix society.
Yeah, it's so beautifully put. And that's why I can't wait to get into the rules, because you spell out exactly some of the techniques and ways to do that, to move forward in the same direction, even if you don't agree with your peer or a colleague. So,
and if you think about it, and this is what's so interesting. We think about this as like this novel concept, is like, well, I don't agree with my peer or my boss, or this has been an age-old problem. Somehow it's manifests itself in a different way today, and probably it's social media, probably it's the extreme voices, but this happens at home in our families. We're individuals. We're unique in our own. We're going to have disagreements. We're going to have things we don't agree on. That doesn't mean that we can't belong, and we can't be friends, and we can't be family, and we can't be companies.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get into the research. I want to dive into this and explain to our listeners sort of what you set out to find, and what did you discover, and maybe even what surprised you the most about your findings.
I have a team of extraordinary researchers, PhDs, social scientists who look at the world and leadership and belonging and really interesting, complex concepts through really interesting, different lenses. We have our traditional research, and then we have the work that we do inside companies that we kind of layer on. So it's twofold. I don't know what I expected, if I'm being really honest with you. I don't know that I could sit there and say, hey, I think we're going to find this, this, and this. What I knew we would find is division. What I knew we would find is difference. What I knew we would find, especially over the course of time that we did it, is just the very basic human struggles that we as a society and leaders are trying to navigate through. So when the research came back, the first piece of research we got was saying 9 out of 10 people think that belonging is important or very important in their organization. And, the first thing is, well, yeah, show me the one, the one that doesn't think that. And then I kind of paused and we talked as a team, and it became a little bit more profound. It wasn't just 9 out of 10 people wanting to belong, but it was 9 out of 10 people wanting to belong in their workplace, at their work. So the importance of work became a really important thing. And you layer that with some of the societal issues we have. The Surgeon General says that 1 out of every 2 people are severely lonely.
Yeah.
That's not at home. That's severely lonely in general. And so you realize that the workplace plays an even more important role from a societal perspective. It used to be many years ago that it was the church, that created belonging. Then it was government that created stuff. And now we're realizing that it's actually companies that are going to be the solution to this. So the first piece of research was kind of the obvious, but as you dug deeper, it was the big aha. Like, okay, this is at work, and at work has a big societal impact. The second part of the research that we found that we thought was pretty interesting was historically, when we do our research of what drives employee satisfaction, retention, happiness, performance, we find that it's strategy and culture. Culture, strategy, culture. They tend to be 1 and 2, and everything else falls beneath that. Not this year. What the research found is that belonging actually is above strategy and culture. So that was a really big moment for us that we do this research. It tells us strategy is important, culture is important. It still is, but not more important than belonging to drive these very fundamental leadership in an organization that drives performance, that creates that connectivity and does the things that we want with our people who ultimately are impacting the bottom line.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I'm as guilty as any executive coach or organizational consultant because I bang on the drum of culture, and I've been doing it for years. Culture is king, right? But you're saying that belonging now is sort of has trumped culture. It's almost a way to replace the old quote attributed to Peter Drucker. Now you should say belonging eats culture and strategy for breakfast, right?
It's so funny that you bring that up because when I wrote my first book, Leading Clarity, I had that line in the book, and my publisher said, "Prove it." And I said, "Excuse me? Everybody talks about that. Everybody knows it's in chalk on our walls." And they said, "Well, prove it." And so we did some research on that. And what we found is actually culture doesn't eat strategy for lunch. And our research showed that actually there's an equilibrium that's necessary. A high culture with low strategy, you're going to have happy people with a bad company. High strategy with low culture. So we talk about the healthy tension between both of them. And so it's really funny. I mean, I spent a lot of time on that, but they're both important. They're all important.
Yeah.
And culture we're big believers in culture. We'll talk about culture as part of one of the rules, as part of our identity conversation in a little bit. But yeah, belonging, creating that space for people of shared importance, that we're gonna share the cultural piece, that values and identity. We come together on that. So they work together. They're intertwined, but culture still sits above it. And the third thing, Marcel, that we found that I think was kind of the big aha to me, and that is when the workforce tells you, "Hey, I'm not asking for more money, I'm asking for more belonging." And you pause and you go, "Wait, what does that mean?" And what people told us is that we're willing to take less money to work for an organization that values belonging, that invests in belonging, that believes in its people and the connectivity and the power of that. And that to me maybe was the big aha for me, was that going, all right, there's a financial impact. We know there's a financial impact to the bottom line. We know from our research that with belonging, with high belonging scores, there's high positivity. When there's a high positivity quotient, which we measure in organizations, that means there's a higher likelihood for an organization to achieve its desired future state. So lots of benefits that come from just investing in the idea of belonging.
Yeah. All right. So I want to segue to the 5 rules, but what's the link? Is it the research informed you of the 5 rules? How did the 5 rules come about?
The 5 rules came about as we got into the definition of what this means and how do we bring this to life. And so we've been in business for 20, 23, 24 years. And so we studied the most challenging environments and the environments that were able to overcome difference, build bridges, and we identified what those elements were in those organizations. So a research of its own, if you will, and pulled out these 5 key rules.
Awesome. Okay, let's get into it. So I'm going to call out a rule, and then you just break it down for us, and then we'll just take a deep dive on each one. So here we go. Rule number 1 of belonging is turn into the power.
Turn into the power. So this rule it's number 1 for a reason. And normally I don't think about the rules in a hierarchy, but it's hard to have the conversation if a leader or an individual, and I believe everybody's a leader. I believe everybody's born to be a leader, maybe of one, maybe of two, maybe of a family, maybe of a department, but we're all leaders. So it's really important to create the mindset and to understand that there are always power structures in front of us. And this is in our organizations, this is in our families, in our communities. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where. There are power structures that impede our ability to achieve progress and to win. And so what's happened in society, and we'll go back to one of the first questions you asked me about DEI. What happened? Well, one of the things that happened is there's power structures, and it could be the culture, it could be the board, it could be a leader. It's often policies in organizations, it's practices. There's a number of things that create that barrier. What happened in the organization with DEI is, well, people became compliant. They checked the box instead of being committed going through the structure. So they circumvented the power structure saying, hey, I've hired a DEI coordinator, but it's not part of your identity. We didn't really fund it to make any change, and we don't really want to make any change with it. We simply wanted to get people off our backs and say, look what we did. That's compliant. We did something, it served someone, but we didn't turn into the power. And so we talk about when we turn into the power, we talk about just kind of a gentle pause. We're so charged. It's not just looking and saying, there's a structure in front of me, let me go. It's being super thoughtful. Sometimes it's an employee that is hard to go into the structure of an organization. We're not saying go charge into the heart of it. We're saying maybe pause and ask a question. Help me understand this policy and the intent. I really want to make sure I understand it. Sometimes it's with a different kind of challenge, but it's always turning into the power.
Yeah. Well, you talked about power structures. I'm wondering if there are power structures at play that are outdated, and yet still we kind of submit to it because of, I don't know, whatever reasons. And one of those is affirmative action, and the other one is Title IX. Do you think that these are I don't know, issues that it's maybe sort of expired its intended purpose?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that we have a duty to look at things that were put in place in a different time. Look, there's some core things that society we can't change. We're not going to change. You go back to the Constitution, you go to some very fundamental things, but sometimes the rule is wrong. Sometimes the application of the rule is wrong, and sometimes the interpretation of the rule is wrong. So there's a whole variety of things. Title IX, I look at and say, wow, I think that the future of Title IX could be called into question because take collegiate athletics is going to look very, very different. The economics of it may not be able to support it. Maybe we do a lot of work with collegiate football teams, with NFL teams, with professional sports teams. But when you look at that, it may be that you have to pull the football out of that equation and say, all right, we're going to balance everything else. But there's real questions, and I'm fascinated every time I get into the conversation with athletic directors and presidents saying, hey, I don't know what the future of this looks like. We want to support everybody. But how can we do that in very difficult times? Really, it's an important question. What's happened is the conversation is shut down because we're afraid to turn into the power. Ooh, if I say that, then I'm going to be branded as XYZ, or, I'll be whatever it is. No, we got to go into it. We got to look at things just like you talked about and say, is this right for where we are, or is there a better solution again, depending on what the future state, the desired future state that we're looking for is.
Yeah, I'm also I'm taking this from one of your chapters, but I think this applies to several of your roles. Is how that middle voice, the middle voice, is not being expressed because things have been pushed so far to the extremes. And yes, a lot of this stuff about DEI has been politicized. I mean, I'm not going to shy away from that. That's just the plain truth. Okay. And I'm not speaking from a political viewpoint, left or right. I'm just stating a fact. Right. And so to me, it seems like the middle has been shut down. And so we're not getting enough voices participating in the conversation about DEI initiatives and strategies.
Of course, it's one of the concepts that I think is one of the most important concepts in the book is what we call the movable middle.
Yeah.
And this is the group that you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they don't speak up is because they're being squeezed by either extreme. The extremes are so loud and they're so problematic for some that most people are just sitting there, head down, want to do their work, and they're only asking for one thing. They're not asking to be part of the conversation. Give me the information. Don't overly corporatize it. Give me the raw, unvarnished information. Trust me. Keyword, trust me to look at it, to understand it, to adopt it, to implement it the way that I think is best. And what happens? This middle becomes the most powerful force. It becomes our movement. It's really, really, really important. And I will argue, and I will argue with as strong as much passion as I can, that the movable middle is a much, much, much bigger group than anyone gives it credit for. And the power of the extremes is the media and social media and the loudness of their voices give them a perception that they are bigger than they really are.
Right.
And it's just not true according to what we see inside organizations.
Right. Because they're the ones that are carrying the loud bullhorns. So we have that perception. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's jump to rule number 2 of belonging. And it's listen without labels. Break that down.
So listen without labels. We're part of a society that values the art of response more than the art of listening. We have to be smart. We have to be in the moment, responding right away. Here's my answer. And what happens? The human brain begins to compartmentalize, and it begins to put things in buckets and go, okay, Marcel's first few words were this, I got it. I'm not really listening to the nuance. I'm not paying attention to the body language. I'm not listening to what you're saying, or in some cases not saying. And it's all because I've got to be right. I've got to be smart, and I've got to respond to you. And so it's super problematic. But what happens when we listen with labels? Let me go this way first. When we listen with labels, we diminish people. We diminish their thinking, their ideas. For me, I was dealing with a really complex, racially charged situation for a client. And a newspaper, online paper wrote a story. And the story went something like Brad Deutser, who is white, is involved with diversity, equity, inclusion, on and blah, 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 blah. Well, the label was true. You can look at me and say, yeah, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem was they used the label to put me in a very narrow category. And we go back to we're all different. We're all unique. My expertise is about bringing different people together to find commonality, to create those spaces for belonging. But in that simple label, they said, Brad Deutser, because of what he looks like, can't do this. So it kind of became a big aha. My partner in this project, who was black, had the same thing written about him. And it was written about him before it was written about me. And he said, Brad, I'm really upset about this. I was chosen to do this work because of my skill, of my expertise. Well, and so I'm like, let me get involved. Let me get it removed from the article. And he's like, no, they won't do that. Well, they did it for him. They didn't do it for me. So ironically, so that's what this chapter, that's why the chapter 2 is called Who is White, labels can be true, but they don't tell the complete story. And so when we listen without labels, we listen more fully, we listen more wholly, we are able to really engage differently. And it's one of my favorite rules. I love them all, but this one forces me to go, you know what? Who am I talking to? Even if I'm not talking to someone I know, it's the gentle pause. Again, the pause comes back. Like, if I don't know who you are, I might imagine I'm talking to a family member. It creates a warmth. I talk in this chapter, I talk a lot about, with this rule, I always talk about one of my favorite things. Eliminate the word why. Eliminate the word why because why did you ask me that? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? What happens? People pull away. People pull away. But when we listen without labels, we're trying to pull them in, invite them in, part of belonging rules. And so the why, if we change the why to help me understand, can you tell me a little bit more? Let's go a little deeper. Talk about, we're inviting people in and they're more open to that conversation. And then if we're more open to listening without labels, think about the belonging we create and the outcomes we facilitate.
It's listening without judgment is how I would boil it down, right? And it's inviting curiosity to learn more about somebody that may be different than you.
I love that phrase that you just used, inviting curiosity. And it's one of the things that I think is just it's so perfectly put that, gosh, if every day we woke up inviting curiosity, we would not be stuck. We would learn one new thing, two new things, and all of a sudden we all are open to a different possible future. Yeah.
I'm going to quote you. I'll paraphrase it a little bit. It's understanding the whole of what is being shared. This is my paraphrase, judgment-free, and limiting our inclination to project our own ideas and our own interpretations, because once it goes in our ears and it's processing the brains, our beliefs, attitudes, whatever else starts to reinterpret that in a way that skews the original message, right? And so now you begin to put the labels on people because you interpret that the wrong way, the message the wrong way. Did I say that right?
Yeah, no, you got it.
All right. Rule number 3 of belonging is choose identity over purpose.
This chapter is, this rule is important for a couple of reasons. One, yes, I want people to think about themselves and their identity. But I'm asking people to look at this also through the lens of an organizational lens, and that is the identity of the organization. I think organizations, and you talked about culture at the beginning of this, is part of a social contract. It's a social contract we have with our workforce. This is the culture. These are the expectations. These are the behaviors that we're going to share. And so it's part of that. Identity over purpose is important. There's a lot of books that talk about a purpose-driven life and purpose. But what we know is that purpose alone doesn't create that differentiation, that doesn't give the differentiation for someone to go, yeah, I'm going to opt in and belong to that. And so we look at it through a broader lens, which is identity, organizational identity. And so identity is our purpose, the why we exist. It's our characteristics, things that are central, enduring, and distinct about our organization. It is what we value, and it's the behaviors that we expect of each other. And so that's how we think about this cultural ecosystem that forms an organization's identity. And the analogy I use in this is often with professional sports. Again, we do work with multiple sports teams. The purpose is often, well, we want to win a championship. Well, we want to do good and lift our community up. We're going to return to our investors. Or whoever the owners. We're going to do. There's only so many different things that when you have 32 teams, however many in baseball, however many in basketball, there's only so many. The purpose is virtually the same. So what's different about the team isn't just their outward identity, the color of their jersey, the name on their jersey. It goes to what they value, what the characteristics are, the behaviors, and those things begin to define and differentiate those teams. So that's rule number 3, and it's all about, we go back to the definition. We create a space of shared importance. Well, that's identity. That's our shared importance. That identity, and then the invitation in is to that identity.
Yeah, I love it. Rule number 5 of belonging is that challenge everything?
Yeah, rule number 4 is challenge everything.
Rule number 4 is correct. Okay.
Yeah. So rule number 4 is challenge everything. Again, what happens here today in companies, in families, in communities, is this idea that we've conflated conflict and challenge. They're one and the same, and they're not. Conflict is two people coming together with their horns locked. I'm right. We never get untangled. We don't really make progress because there's conflict. Look no farther than the American political system.
Yep.
We're not going to ever swing that far one way because the conflict keeps us in a certain place. That's not healthy. What is healthy is the idea of challenge. And challenge from a social media standpoint, from a societal standpoint, we can't challenge. You can't challenge someone older than you. You don't want to. And the answer to that is that's not accurate. Challenge needs to be a bigger part of our society. How we challenge needs to be different. Challenge is a creative force multiplier. It's one of the most important things in the creative process because it's two people coming together, just like with conflict, with deeply held ideas. But the difference is there's a willingness to say, hey, when we come together, there could be a third, a fourth, a fifth idea. So the idea is just the openness. And we define a process called the effective challenge. There's a long version and there's a short version of it. But it's a powerful way to think about the decisions that we make in our own lives, the work that we put out. If I could do an effective challenge, one little thing that I'd change, coming at it with positivity, the world looks different.
Yeah. So you mentioned it. I've mentioned it. Politics, conversations are so toxic these days because we're in this age in society where people get so easily triggered and let their emotions get the best of them. So like if what you hear differs from whatever narrative you subscribe to, right? Then what happens is you start to lean on or value your reaction rather than listening, right? Active listening and empathy and, again, curiosity, right? So do you have maybe some techniques, because I want to bring this to the practical, is we need to break that cycle. We got to break that cycle in conversations because it's getting so toxic now that we can't even walk into the room if we know that somebody believes differently than I do, right? So maybe walk us through some steps so that we can effectively challenge with, free of this crazy conflict.
Well, there's a couple things here. And we go, I go deep into it in the chapters, giving very practical advice and exercises on how to think about that. One of the things is we've got to get away from the idea that we are going to change someone else. Mm-hmm. So I'm an expert at change. That's what my company does. Is we're human change is what we talk about. I recognize I'm not going to change another person. I'm going to create a platform. I'm going to create a space, a shared space where that person can change on their own. I go into a conversation never trying to win the conversation. If I have to win it, I'm going in with a losing mindset. So that's number one. I'm going into a conversation. It doesn't matter if I'm right or left. It doesn't matter which side I'm on here in the equation. If I think I'm going to win them over and pull them and get them to move to the middle, no way. So it's the outcome. If it's I'm going into the conversation and I'm really interested, going back, listening without labels, I'm really interested, Marcel. Talk to me about how you see this. I'm interested. I'll tell you, I may not agree with you, and that's okay. Yeah. But I'm fascinating. You used the word invite curiosity before. I'm really curious. So part of it is not going in with the win. Part of it is the who, recognizing that I'm talking to someone I care about on the other side, even if I don't know them, going, all right, it's going to temper my response. When I feel like when it feels like it's hitting a point where it's getting to a point of no return, it's the pause. And I think the pause is so powerful. It's in our breath. And it's the pause to say, something I need to really think about. I appreciate the conversation. Validate someone else's opinion, no matter how crazy it is. Say, I appreciate your thoughts. I need to go think about this, and give your space, walk away. So there's some simple things that we can do. This last week, I write a newsletter every couple of weeks, and I wrote a story this week on just this issue, where my job was to bridge the Palestinian Muslim community with the Jewish community in a location. And so I started with the local imam and the rabbi. Yeah. And I almost didn't have the conversation with either of them because I thought, wow, the labels, they're going to think this and they're going to think this. And when I got into it and I realized it's not about winning, it's about getting back to the idea that you talk about, more human leadership, what I talk about, human-centered leadership. We got to a very human place where it's like, whoa, wait, these are people. Yeah. They're funny. They care. They come from a different perspective. My job's not to change either of their perspective. My job is simply to build a bridge. And so there's different ways to do that.
Yeah. I love this as well that you mentioned in this chapter, is to encourage agreement, because we tend to come to these conversations with our boxing gloves on. And so it's kind of to reshift our perspective of why we're even coming to the conversation. If you come to the conversation with a positive mindset, you talked about that, positivity, with a positive mindset, that we are here to agree on a direction moving forward. And again, we've said this at the beginning, you don't have to agree with the person or belief system, but it's at least to agree on the direction that you're headed, right? And to me, it's so powerful to actually come into the conversation with that kind of encouragement, an encouraging agreement, because that to me means that you're not coming in ready to fight.
And it's all about that mindset. Look, if I want to come in for a fight, I'm going to pick a fight every single time.
Exactly. Right.
Like, human beings are really smart. I give them a lot of credit. And so we know if I want to come in with love and compassion and openness, I know what's going to happen, even if the other person wants the fight. And if I stay on love and compassion and kindness and humanity, we're not going to get in a fight. But if I come in looking for the fight, I promise you, we'll be able to create that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, rule number 5. I'm laughing, Brad, because in this day and age, this is going to be a hard one to swallow. Okay, it's demand 100% of the truth.
It's hard to swallow. The funny thing is, most people tell me, oh, well, I always tell 100% of the truth. And the answer is, really? Do you really tell 100% of the truth? Or you tell 100% of your truth? It's different than the truth. And what we've done in our research, again, with organizations, what we know is that most organizations, the highest performing organizations, operate on somewhere between 80-85% of the truth. And if you're watching, listening, and you go, we're better than that, great. 90% of the truth? Awesome. But the reality is, within each of our organizations, at our most senior level leadership, at our manager level, we don't have near 100% of the truth. There's things that are not easy, that it's just easier not to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about diversity or equity, or I'm not going to talk about social issues. I'm not going to talk about the political ramifications. I'm not going to talk about difficult subjects. It's easier because you and I, Marcel, can go talk by the water cooler. We can chat offline. We agree with each other. We're right. We don't need to put it out with everyone else. And that's happening more and more. Part of it is this decrease in psychological safety that we're seeing, this imbalance of fear and trust. And so that's creating an environment that's not encouraging 100% of the truth. It's in fact encouraging just the opposite.
Ugh.
Because it's not just about our companies and surviving in our companies. It's recognizing that in my organization, when I leave, there's a good likelihood that I'm going to go see someone at church, at the synagogue, at the mosque. I'm going to go see someone at a restaurant, at a community event. And so I can't be ostracized there. And so it's easier just to keep myself to my own thoughts to myself. And part of it is it's important for all of us in meetings to be able to ask ourselves a question. Have I asked everything? And I'm a big believer. We don't have to have the answers. We do have to have the questions.
Oh, man.
And so the idea is, have I shared my 100% of the truth? Is there a question that I can ask that may get us to a place where we can get a little bit more truth to get to where we need to go? But 100% of the truth is important. And I think the story I use in the book is of the Holocaust Museum, of a transformation of the Holocaust Museum in Houston that we were responsible for. And the conversation was, well, what part of the truth do we want? Do you want 80%? Because if you take 80% of the 6 million people who were murdered, that leaves out a lot of a big swath of humanity. Do we want to think about it from a corporate standpoint? So there's lots of different ways to think about it, but you opened it up saying that you lead with 100% of the truth, and you'd probably tell everybody listening, hey, nothing more important than this is the truth.
Yeah. So how do we implement that, though? Brad, I'm thinking about if you're a CEO and you want to have a strategy of speaking and demanding 100% of the truth 100% of the time. I'm not saying that it's possible for every executive leader or even for every company. It might take some seasons to do that, but if I want to get the wheels in motion, I mean, what's a good way to implement 100% of the truth?
Well, your last statement is right. It's not a turn it on, turn it off. It's a practice. It is part of the identity of the organization. We work with organizations, and so one of the first things I tell people is go back to your identity, that cultural ecosystem that defines your company and how you interact with each other. Does it encourage 100% of the truth? We work with one of the largest 3 or 4 consulting firms in the world came to us and asked us to help culturally for them. They said, hey, help us because we want to do, it was with innovation. And we've been charged with it. And we looked at it and I said, but your company is going to reject it every time because it's not who your company is. You got to go back to the identity. And I think that's true here as well. I think it's true, starting with identity is what are we encouraging as a company? How do we keep people safe and that ability? I'm not saying if you're the leader, go in front of your people and saying, hey, we are going to cut 5% of the workforce, 10% of the workforce in the next 3 months, and I'm just going to let you know about it later. That's not necessarily the truth. Sometimes we sound the alarm saying we're evaluating the future, but part of this is the conversations we have. Part of this is the willingness to sound the alarm. Part of this is as a leader, our insistence at the very top of an organization to start and practice this at the top by encouraging everyone to ask one more question about this conversation. Write it down on a piece of paper, on a sticky note. What is the question that we're not asking? And sometimes it's little mini increments. The goal is 100%. But if we can get from 85 to 90, think about that 5% gap that you've just closed. Think about the conversations, the difficult conversations you're having. If you're at 90 and we can close it just a little bit more and a little bit more, always with the goal of 100%, organizationally, you're building on a platform that is much more sustainable. There are no secrets. There are no hidden treasures that you're operating around. They're all out there exposed. When we do that, we become better leaders, more human-centered leaders, more vulnerable leaders, and that vulnerability is key to bringing people together. I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to say things that few people ever say in a meeting. It's why I'm in the spaces I'm in, because I'm less worried about what social media is going to say about me, and I'm much more worried about connecting the two human beings, or the two groups of humans, or the three groups of humans, creating that human connection. So I'll go out there, I'll challenge, I'll say things that you're like, whoa, what did you just say? Because it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a daring style of leadership when you exercise vulnerability as a strength. I say daring because it takes a lot of courage to do that.
It's the whole idea of the man in the arena, the woman in the arena, the person in the arena. I mean, leadership today is about being courageous.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No, there is no other way around it. It used to be that leaders could lead with strategy. This is what we're going to do. Today, you talk about human leadership. It starts with courage. It starts with heart. It starts with empathy, emotion. It starts with the most human characteristics that sometimes feel mushy and soft. I lose my mind when people talk about, well, that's the softer side. And I'll tell you BS to that. It's not the softer side. It's the harder side. And it's the side that's going to actually drive your people, connect your company, and keep your employees working for you.
Yeah, it reminds me of the line that Tom Peters said. I forget which book of his, In Search of. Anyway, basically it says that soft is the new hard, and so we have to replace what we used to think our hard skills with things like empathy, vulnerability, and emotional intelligence, because those are the hard skills now to have. Yeah,
they're the gap on the 100% of the truth too.
Mm.
It's being open to being wrong. It's being open to challenging. It's being open to being vulnerable and saying things that may not be the most popular thing in the room.
Right. Yeah. Speak with emotional honesty.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give a shout out to the book because I love how you structure this book. Folks, if you like exercises, tools, checklists, strategies, I mean, this book is full of them. So, Brad, I want to call you out to maybe give us a quick, simple exercise from your coaching toolbox for our listeners that maybe you can walk away with something here that is like practical, applicable to the job.
Absolutely. Can I give two?
Sure.
Two easy ones. All right. So
do it.
The first one is the idea of gratitude, not gratitude, but gratitude with a emphasis on the you in gratitude. I encourage leaders to write down every single day one thing they're grateful for. But It's not the traditional, I'm grateful for my family, my people who work with me, all these things that I have. No, I want you to be grateful for one thing about you and only you every single day. Look inward. Leaders forget that gratitude, very few people are saying to the leader, thank you, I'm grateful for you. So it's up to you to fill your own bucket up. And so fill it up by starting with gratitude. One thing, and here's the deal. In 30 days, I don't want you to repeat yourself once. I want you to find 30 things about you that you're grateful for. Easy when you think about a spouse, a loved one, a child, someone that you really admire. Oh gosh, they're beautiful, they're kind, they're this, they're that. When you look inward and you look in a mirror and you start doing it to you, different story. So that's one thing I'd love people to do. And the other exercise I go in great detail in the book is the leadership tether. I love the leadership tether because leadership doesn't start at a certain time later in our life. Leadership started early in our lives. And so think about a long kind of tether, a string, a rope. And as you start on one side of it, start as early as you can remember the times that you had leadership opportunities, the times that you invited people in or they invited you in, and begin to tell that journey. For me, that started my earliest time when I start my leadership tether. I got the Best Rester Award in kindergarten. They couldn't find anything else to give me for achievement, so I got the Best Rester. And I built on that. Somehow, I'm 58 years old. I still go back to that moment as a 5-6-year-old that I got that award. I was a line leader. I was a camp counselor, all these different things. So spell out all the times that you were a leader, that you had leadership opportunities, that you were recognized. I look at those as the things that impacted me. I've been fired twice. I've changed jobs. Those are part of my leadership tether. They were major moments for me. And look at that. Identify after you list all these out from wherever you start to wherever you are. Look at it. See what commonalities exist. See the times that you belonged. See the times that you invited other people in to belong, and then decide how you want to lead going forward. So that's one of my favorites. There's more clear rules of how to do it, but it's a super interesting exercise.
Thanks for that. Oh man, this has been a great conversation. So Brad, we bring it home with 2 questions, tradition on the show with every guest. Okay. Number 1, I'm a leader and I want to adopt a more human-centered, leadership approach to make a greater impact on my team, my organization. So sticking to the theme of the show, love in action, how do I lead with more practical, actionable love and care day in and day out?
I think number 1 is starting with love yourself. I think we're so conditioned as leaders to love everyone around us. But if we can't find something that we're grateful for about ourselves, if we can't be vulnerable and be willing to invite people into our lives, into our hopes, into our dreams, into our fears, it's hard to do that. And so to me, it's about starting with me and being open to the world and being open to being vulnerable, inviting people in and continuing to extend those invitations.
Yeah, but I love that it starts with you first. Self-love. Yeah. All right. Finally, you close us out your way with a final takeaway, final message from this whole conversation. What's that one thing you'd like to us to walk away with?
I think that the final message is we all belong. And in a society where there's those who are marginalized and everybody has different, we've been told we fit here or there. My message is we all belong. And as leaders, we all have a responsibility to invite people in and make sure that they know that they belong. And when we do that, we not only change our companies, but we begin to change society, and we fundamentally change the outlook of people around us. And so the power of belonging is extraordinary. The research supports it. And when you lead as a belonging leader, as a human-centered leader, you change your company, and you can change the world. And so we love to help. We love to talk about it. As I tell everybody, when you read the book, or if you just you scratch your head on things that I say, hey, pick up the phone, send an email, reach out, and let's have a conversation. It's where belonging begins.
And the book, again, is called Belonging Rules, 5 Crucial Actions that Build Unity and Foster Performance. Brad, if people want to connect with you and learn more about your business or the book, where can they go? Show us a few places.
So you can always visit our website at www.deutser.com, DEUTSER.com. We have our Deutser Clarity Institute under that, which is Willy Wonka land for leaders. It's places that are Willy Wonka land, with games on the ceiling, floors, everywhere, to create these spaces for belonging. And we also have our Institute for Belonging, instituteforbelonging.com. And then finally, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Brad Deutser, and on Twitter. But however you want to reach out to me. I love the conversation, and we love to help.
It's been real, and I've learned from you, and I really, truly appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. I'm grateful. I learn in every conversation I have, and I think that's the magic of what people like you give to the world, is we get to share ideas and build on each other's thoughts and experiences. And you know what? Putting love in action is there's no greater honor and deed of importance than that. So thank you for putting it out there.
Appreciate that. And you can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes as well. I will make sure that all of Brad's contact info and several websites are on there as well. And don't forget, you can watch this on YouTube, and you'll see a YouTube link to watch the show on my website. You can find all that on marcelschwantes.com. And finally, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, hey, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.